What inspired actress Gabourey Sidibe to write a memoir? She'll be here to talk about her book, This Is Just My Face, Try Not to Stare.
Books provided safety for me. Books would tell me a story and not call me fat. At the same time, I didn't have to hide. I didn't have to pretend to be okay.
How do you explain astrophysics in 150 pages? Neil deGrasse Tyson will join us, along with the Times' science writer Dennis Overby, to talk about his new book, Astrophysics for People in a Hurry.
We learned that time did not begin with the first humans. It long predates it, back to the Big Bang. And the future of the universe is a whole other conversation.
Alexander Alter will give us an update from the literary world. Plus, we'll talk about what we and the wider world are reading. This is Inside the New York Times Book Review. I'm Pamela Paul. Gabourey Sidibe joins us now. Her new book is called This Is Just My Face, Try Not to Stare. Gabi, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, I got to start with this title, which is so great. Did you just know that this was going to be the title, or did this take contemplation?
Oh, no. That is probably the 400th title. We went through so many. Actually, so I shopped the book with the name A Psychic Told Me So. There are 2 chapters about what psychics have told me in the book, so I thought it would be named that. But so This Is Just My Face is it's pretty much derived from a tweet about how much I hate the idea of resting bitch face, which is just for women. Have you heard that?
You know, I love that idea. I love the idea of resting bitch face, but it's not just for women, because a writer did a profile of Jonah Hill in the New York Times Magazine, and he fessed up to having resting bitch face.
He did. Well, he
so maybe
fessed
he's
up
the rare male who does that.
He's the rare, but he's the one who said he had it.
Yeah.
So, like, I feel like for women, we're always accused of having resting bitch face, and it's just this idea that, well, you're not smiling at me, and so you're being a bitch. And it's like, but this is just my face. I'm not smiling at you. This is actually just my face. And so the book is not 100% positive. It's not all great experiences. It's all my experiences, and they haven't all been great. And I wrote 100% of this book. And what I'm saying is, this is just my life. It's not smiling at you, but it's still valid. The same way my face is still valid, even though it's not smiling at you. And by Try Not to Stare, I'm asking you to please be kind. And please do not judge me for my experiences, or my face for that matter.
But we can judge you for your prose.
Please do. Compliment me. Don't insult me.
When did you decide, and how did you decide that you wanted to write a book? And did you know that it would be a memoir?
I didn't know it would be a memoir. I didn't know. So it really started from an essay that I wrote about confidence, called Confidence in Cookies, about how I baked my 4th grade class cookies, but none of them ate the cookies because nobody liked me. And it's really about how people keep asking me why I have confidence, because apparently I shouldn't have any at all based on my appearance. And that essay kind of spawned an entire book, because I realized that the idea of why I shouldn't have confidence from other people really upset me. And it's annoying for me. And it's one of those things that, like, people ask me all the time that was unsettled in me. And I realized that I felt unsettled while writing the first sentence, but I felt really alleviated from that anger by the last sentence. And so I realized that writing could be therapeutic and cathartic. And I thought at first that I would write stories about what it's like to, be nominated for an Oscar, or what it's like to go to movie premieres. And then I just realized that writing about that wasn't helping me. It wasn't helping my psyche, and it wasn't like feeding my soul. And so I just happened to start writing things that I had to kind of file away in my own heart and in my own brain. And it turned into this entire book, which they keep telling me is a memoir. So
you say writing the book was cathartic, but was it difficult at parts?
Absolutely. I think writing anything that's really truthful can be really hard. I like to be a private person. I mean, I know I feel anytime like a famous person says, or celebrity is like, I'm really private. It's like, I see you all the time on talk shows. Like, you're not, there's this idea, but like, that's what I do for a living. Mm-hmm. But in my real life, I'm very protective of myself and protective of my truth and my experiences. And writing that down and giving that to the world takes a lot of thought. And it's like I'm tearing the walls I have to build around myself down, and I'm letting people in, and I'm not sure that that's the right thing to do. But
it's too late now.
I did it. The book's on sale or whatever. You can go down to the Barnes and Nobles and get my soul. And what I found is I'm really proud of it, and it's really, really tough. And there are some real issues that I had to work through. Like, I took 3 years to write the book, and at the beginning of writing the book, the first chapter, I'd cut off my relationship with my father. Mm-hmm. He was, basically kind of dead to me. I was done talking to him, and then by like a year and a half into writing it, I figured him out, and I figured our relationship out, and I figured out that not only that I could forgive him, that I should forgive him, but that I wanted to. Mm-hmm. And that forgiving him was not necessarily letting him off the hook for the ways he's hurt me. It was letting myself off the hook. What they don't tell you growing up is that one day you'll have to see your parents as people and not as the gods that you think that they are. And I had to write this book in order to see not just my dad, but my mom too, and to see them from the outside and to gain a different opinion of who they are.
Is the act of writing about them, I mean, you, in a way, are sort of turning them into characters in a book. Did that also force you to see them differently?
Absolutely. I realized that, I formed an opinion about who my father was at 6 years old. Mm-hmm. And it's almost 30 years later. And it's okay for me to have a different opinion. It's okay for me to see him differently. Because, the same with my mom, where I was convinced that they were superhuman and they were gods and they knew everything, and every time they hurt me, it must be because they wanted to, instead of it just being because they're people and they're human and so they fail.
For those who have not read the book or the wonderful profile of you that appeared in the Times this week, tell us about the way your parents met. It's sort of the anti-meet cute story.
My parents were friends. Mm-hmm. My father is Senegalese. He was born in Senegal and I guess migrated here. And my mom is from Georgia, and they had a few friends in common. And I think my mom heard that my father was looking for a wife in order to stay in the country. And they met, and, they became friends, and she decided to help him out because she cared about him and he cared about her. And so they married for the green card, and then they moved in with each other. And then a year after they were married, they started actually dating each other, mm-hmm. and found that they loved each other. Which I feel like that it's no longer marriage fraud, right? And so they were married for real. And then they had my brother and I.
You talked earlier on about confidence and writing the essay that sort of spawned the book. The remarkable thing, I think, about your confidence is that you also, and you write about this in the book, deal with a lot of anxiety. How do those two sort of work together? Clearly the anxiety has not gotten in the way of confidence. Or has it?
I think that people think that confidence is something that you can catch like a Pokemon, mm-hmm. and have forever. That's not the way it works, I have to put my confidence on several times a day because there's always something around the corner waiting to knock it down. I compare my confidence to lipstick. If I put lipstick on in the morning, once I leave the house, wherever I'm going, wherever my destination is, by the time I get there, the lipstick has worn off, so I need to refresh it. And that's what confidence is. I keep putting it on because I do have trouble with my anxiety. I think it's hard to live in New York, and I was born and raised here. I think it's hard to live in New York, and not just New York, but anywhere. It's hard to live with other people in general. It's just hard to live in society
it's just
without
hard to
being
live,
anxious.
is what we're
just
saying.
Hard to, look, you guys being a human, so horrifying. I have anxiety just as much as the next person, and I figured out ways to deal with it because a huge part of my job is projecting confidence. That's like my job. I think once I like busted it down, I thought of what I do as an actress. What I do as an actress is I walk into a room and I have to convince people in that room to like me more than the person that they just saw and more than the person that they will see after me. I have to convince you to like me. And so I need to have confidence in order to do that.
The irony is that your first role, so amazing and precious, was you had to suppress that confidence in that particular role in her character.
Oh, no, I wouldn't say that. Precious has a lot of things going on. She's an abused woman, and she is a woman who is hiding within her own body from all of the abuse that she has to face. But there's confidence in that, too. It's just about getting through the day. There were plenty of scenes where Precious would allow her confidence to take over, where she had fantasy scenes. In her fantasy, she was a movie star.
Right.
In her fantasy, she had, the sexiest boyfriend who loved her and would dance with her. In her fantasies, that's where her confidence happened. And so it was really, really interesting and amazing and a blessing to be able to play two sides of confidence.
I want to talk a little bit about your reading life because you did our By the Book interview this week, and you talk about how, also in the book, about how you were a big reader as a child. What did books provide for you growing up?
Oh, man, I didn't have friends growing up. More than anything, books provided company for me. Books provided safety for me. Books would tell me a story and not call me fat. At the same time, I didn't have to hide. I didn't have to pretend to be okay with books. I could just be myself, and I could get lost there because I didn't enjoy the world that I actually lived in. I really love The Color Purple. I would read The Color Purple whenever I felt really depressed so that I could, so that I would know that there was a worse life out there somewhere.
Do you still seek that out in books, or has your sort of motivation for reading changed?
My motivation for reading has certainly changed. I think as soon as I got out of the prison that was childhood for me, I was finally safe. I had safety. There was nothing to run from anymore. I figured out how to have friends. Kids don't like sarcastic kids. Adults don't like sarcastic kids either. But sarcastic adults love other sarcastic adults. I found my family.
Right. You grew into your sarcasm.
Yes, I grew into it. And so now I read books for pleasure. Now I still do love escaping in a world that I don't belong to. I really, really love it. And it still is like a safety blanket.
I'm going to ask you a Hollywood question now, but it's book related. You often hear actors complaining that, it's not all glamorous, that they sit around on the set, that most of the time they're just sitting there and they're waiting, and it's incredibly boring, and so they take up knitting. And I'm like, that sounds like the best job in the world because you could just sit there and read. And I'm curious, do people read out there? Do you feel like you found a community of other readers, people for whom books also are a central pleasure?
Absolutely. Yeah. I definitely have friends. I used to trade books with my mom as a kid, and I love trading books with my friends now. And also, as a Hollywood type, it's a good idea to read as much as you can so that you can find a book that you might be interested in turning into a script. It's really, really, really a good idea to read. I know a few actors that can sit on set and read. I cannot. I love books so much, and I can inhale them so much that reading a script becomes a distraction. So reading a book is a distraction when I need to be reading a script. I can't do both. You know who reads a lot? Emma Roberts. I worked with her on American Horror Story, and she was always on set reading a book, and she'd read a book a week or something. And now she has her own book club, and I'm like, you're such a nerd.
So you don't have a book club?
There's a book club that I love watching them, and I'm not really a part of them, but I do watch them for the next book that I want to read. They're called Well-Read Black Girls. And they're currently reading my book, and I'm so excited because I've had my eye on them for over a year, and I always take recommendations from them.
So when you talk about reading books and thinking about them as possible movies, if you had to think of a kind of ideal character, a character from literature that you would love to play.
There's the book Gal by Ruthie Mae Bolton. That was one of the first books I traded with my mom. I always thought that story was such an amazing story. It's about this woman who grew up in the rural South, and her grandmother, she's raised by her grandparents. Her grandmother was killed by her grandfather. And he was so mean and abusive to them once, he was the only one raising them. And she's got these older sisters that are really her aunts. Her mother was the oldest sister who had her and left. But once she's an older woman, she has to go back home because her grandfather is sick and she has to take care of him. And it's this idea of what goes through you emotionally and in your psyche when you have to be the caretaker of the abuser. And I just think that that's something interesting to explore in a character. And it's a true story. And so I would love a crack at that. But as a writer and a filmmaker, I just directed my first film last summer. It's a short film, but I'm really excited about it. I think the real get is to start writing my own roles. And so yes, there are definitely characters in literature that I'd love to play, but I'd also would love to play the characters that I've built in my own brain.
So more books to come from you.
I hope so.
Well, the first book is This Is Just My Face, Try Not to Stare. Amazing title by Gabourey Sidibe. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I'm very excited to have with us today it's a very multi-hyphenate introduction here, the director of the Hayden Planetarium, best-selling author, host of the show Star Talk. What else am I missing? Neil deGrasse Tyson, thank you for being here.
Oh, yeah, I'm just an astrophysicist.
And an astrophysicist, of course, the very basic qualification.
I'm a meth first, and then everything else is icing.
Everything else follows.
Yeah.
And also joining us is my colleague Dennis Overby, author of Einstein and Love and a cosmic affairs correspondent for the New York Times, the unofficial title.
Sound like he named that himself.
I did name it myself.
Great name, great title.
So I will ask all the questions that come from a place of ignorance, and then Dennis will join in with some more informed questions about astrophysics. But let's talk about the genesis of this new book. The book is called Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. Why this book?
What I noticed was that there were people walking around who were busy people, hardworking people, and they would catch snippets, fragments of headlines. And maybe with no time to read the full article, but they knew it was important. And what kind of words might they retain? Exoplanet. So they've heard that, but or Goldilocks zone, or dark matter, dark energy, multiverse. There are these pieces of ideas that float in front of them, and I felt that it was time to consummate this relationship you might want to have with the universe by writing this book. And it's a curated selection of really cool stuff in the universe, some of which is completely mind-blowing. And it's there for people who really don't have the time to read a fat book. It's not a large book, but it's all in there. And people joke with me, did you name it Astrophysics for People in a Hurry because Astrophysics for Dummies was taken?
Right.
I said, no, this is like real astrophysics. There's no dumbing down at all. You're going to learn. And I'm delighted to be in the position to teach.
One thing that your editor told me about this book was that you wanted it to be small, like physically small. For those who haven't seen it, it's like the size of a mass market paperback.
But it's hardcover.
But it's hardcover.
Right.
And that the format was very important to you.
Yeah, because they Well, we had a whole discussion in an office with designers and their marketing people. They said we need it to be big so that it can sit big on the bookshelf like all these other books. And I said, well, maybe if it's small, it will stand out for being small. I wanted to make sure that the shape and size and scale of the book was commensurate with how you think you would be using it at waiting for the bus or a train, especially at the airport. Look at how much interstitial time there is at an airport because you got to get there early and wait. Then you're on the plane. You can't open your computer yet. So I see this as serving that busy person. By the way, if you're not busy and you got plenty of time, I got other books for you.
Right.
So, I'm not going to make you buy this book, but I'm going to tell you a lot of my heart and soul, my pedagogical soul, is infused in the chapters of this book.
It's for those moments when you don't have good cell phone reception, but you need something to read.
Astrophysics for when your cell phone reception is bad.
That's right.
That's an
that
equivalent
could be another
title.
that could be for the
Astrophysics you
paperback.
can put in your pocket.
Right.
Oh yeah, pocket-sized astrophysics.
Dennis, jump in here because you report on these things all the time, and you've read the book.
I got to start by saying that for the people who aren't in the room, Neil is wearing a black suit and a black shirt and a black tie with comets and planets painted on it. It's quite striking. And
thank you.
Not very many people can wear the kind of clothes you wear and carry them off. But
is that like saying, that orange dress looks good on you?
Right.
No,
it wouldn't
you
look
mean
good
like-
on someone who is not an astrophysicist.
Well, but thank
actually,
you.
I know that you're proud of your tie collection.
Yeah, I got about 100 such ties,
Yeah.
and this one was actually hand-painted by a fan, and
Right.
I'm wearing it now.
So there are many arresting images in this book, and there were a couple I wanted to ask you to elucidate on. At one point, you talk about a cosmic ray that has so much energy that it could knock a golf ball across a green. And that's an amazing statement. Are there ways that we don't know of yet in the universe that a single particle could gain so much energy?
The universe brims with mysteries. One of them is the origin of these very highly energetic particles, many of them protons moving through space. We think many may come from the centers of we think they all come from the centers of galaxies. We have highly energetic phenomenon going on there. But we have to come up with a way that they accelerate to such high speeds, 99.99999999% the speed of light. And so you can calculate how much energy that has. And when you calculate it, you write down that number, and then you ask, and this is just a single subatomic particle, and you ask, what energy does it take to hit a golf ball across a green? And they're equal. So I get to make the image, if the cosmic ray's energy were completely absorbed by this golf ball, if it hit it rather than passing through, which is what it probably would do, if it got completely absorbed, it would put the golf ball into the cup. What I have found, of course, if you connect everyday life as examples of the physics you're communicating, that anchors the idea in people in ways that I don't know that any other means of communications can accomplish. Because you come to the table with a scaffold of pop culture, let's say. So you know who Beyonce is, and you know what football is, and you know some basic things about our society. If I can reach for that, this is a scaffold you already have, and I don't have to test your fluency in it. Mm-hmm. That's the definition of pop culture. Now I clad that scaffold with the science. Now it just fits perfectly. Because I don't have to explain every way you need to understand this because you came half prepared to receive it. You know how big a golf ball is.
And how hard it is to get it into the hole.
Well, you have to aim the cosmic ray. That's different.
That's another issue.
Yeah.
So another point, you talk about your biggest nightmare. And this is the idea that since the universe is being pushed apart by dark energy, at some point we won't be able to see distant galaxies anymore.
Yeah.
And the question is whether there's something that's already happening that's erased the past.
Yeah. This stuff we have measured that we call dark energy. We don't even know if it's energy. We shouldn't have even named it that. And I want to go on a campaign, we just call it Fred or Betty or Wilma. Just call it something where you're not biased by the name because we have absolutely no idea what it is. But we measure it. And it is a pressure in the vacuum of space operating against the wishes of gravity, forcing an acceleration of the expanding universe. And we expect this to keep up and not abate because it's in the vacuum, and the more the universe expands, the more vacuum you have. So we expect this to proceed exponentially into the future. And there will be a day when even the nearest galaxies to us outside of our local group, the nearest galaxies to our local group, will accelerate beyond our horizon, removing all records of the history of the universe, because we obtain the history of the universe by observing these galaxies far away in space, going back in time, right back to the Big Bang itself. If all of that accelerates beyond our horizon, it's gone. A future civilization looking up with their telescopes, if they don't have our records preserved through that time, trillions of years into the future, they will have no such thing as cosmology in their science.
So this is like Alvy Singer was right in Annie Hall to worry that the universe is expanding.
I forgot about that line. That's right. That's the thing you should worry about.
Yes.
But that's not what keeps me awake.
That part's okay.
No, that part's okay. I got that. I now think to myself, is there any chapter ripped away from the book of science today that we have no clue was once there before we came on the scene with our capacity to measure? If that is the case, then here we are groping at some edifice we call the universe, thinking we're fitting it together in a coherent way, but in fact it may be impossible to know the whole story because we are missing fundamental parts of what was this universe, preventing us from gaining any meaningful understanding of how it all works. That's what I lose sleep on.
There is such a case in modern cosmology. The idea of inflation, which is a thing kind of sort of ironed out the very early universe, one of its virtues, its founders said, was that it erased everything that came before. So you would never be able to ask, where did the universe come from before this force at the beginning of time?
And plus we might wonder, if you were around before that episode, might there have been evidence of what was going on before the Big Bang itself? That's another
many
interesting
good premises
Right.
for post-apocalyptic fiction in this conversation. You say in your introduction that the public seems to you to be, more interested in science than ever before.
Yes, and there's unimpeachable evidence for that, yes.
How do you see that in sort of your day-to-day life as an astrophysicist?
So I wake up every morning astonished that I have 7 million Twitter followers. Why is that even so? How is that possible? Unless there's an ember that might have been lit long ago, maybe as far back as childhood, waiting to be fanned so that it can reignite the curiosity that we know we once had, but we lost at some point. I think I'm feeding that inherent curiosity that's there. I don't think I'm creating it. I think I'm feeding it. Now, let's get for measures outside of myself. There was a marquee movie with marquee actors and a marquee director called The Martian. There's Matt Damon, who's a star in his own movies. Jessica Chastain is in this. All these people you recognize, they came together to do a movie where science was a character unto itself.
Right.
Science was so important, you didn't even care about interpersonal relations, as is the backbone of so many well-written movies. In The Martian, all you really cared about was, is he smart enough, clever enough, does he know enough STEM fields to not die?
Right.
That was the suspense of the film. And what's the number one show on television in any category? The Big Bang Theory. We're now entering an era of successful biopics based on scientists. The bio of Stephen Hawking, The Theory of Everything.
Now we just had Hidden Figures.
We have Einstein now on the National Geographic.
Yeah, exactly. So now there's a
series,
multi-part series on Einstein, not in the movie theaters because they got 13 or however many episodes. It's on the National Geographic Channel. So Cosmos, that I had the privilege of hosting, did not air in the sort of the science ghettos of the upper channels. It aired on Fox in primetime on a Sunday night. Where else are you on a Sunday night but home?
Right.
So I think this is real, and our access to science, quality science, is greater than ever before.
What was the hardest concept to distill in this concise, breezy, and yet serious format?
They're very hard concepts that I just leave out because this is I call this a curated selection because there's some parts of the universe that are much easier to talk about and more fun to think about. And so I picked those. This is not a curriculum. There's plenty of stuff I left out that you won't even care to know about. I promise you.
This is a highlight.
Yes. I have to ask you, since we're talking about nightmares and fears and things that keep you up at night, you wrote this book before the current election, and a lot of scientists are concerned about the sort of state of science, the state of science research. How concerned are you?
As an educator, I don't think so much about the politicians and laws and legislation. I think about the electorate. So you can run after President Trump, for example. You go after him, beat him on the head in whatever way you choose or think or want with your words. But there's the matter of the fact that 60 million people voted for him. Mm-hmm. For me as an educator, I look to the 60 million people. And I say, okay, if you vote for someone who does not understand science, that's fine, by the way. You can't expect a president to be completely fluent in science, in all science. But what you would want, if they're not, is to know how to trust someone who is. This is why you have advisors. And that's part of what it is to be a leader. Knowing when you don't know something and reaching for support when that occasion arises. So I would ask, how is it that we can have people rise up in our educational system, be awarded degrees, high school degree first, and then maybe a college degree, and you come out on the other side and then stand in denial of emergent scientific truths? That means only one thing, that in your K through 12 or K through 16 education, there's a gap. There's a point where you might have been taught what science is and how and why it works, and you are not. There's something absent in that curriculum. Because if you were taught that, then you would understand what science is and how and why it works. I look back and I say, something's got to be added to the school curriculum so that people understand how this works. Abe Lincoln knew how this works. In a year then when he clearly had more important things on his mind, 1863, the year of Gettysburg and the Gettysburg Address, he signs into law the creation of the National Academy of Sciences. Because he knew that science should matter more than ever before going forward. And that was created as a service agency to advise the executive branch and the legislative branch in all ways that science could touch laws that they may be writing. And as you go forward, all manner of scientific agencies are supported and funded and recognized in their value to who and what we are as a nation. After the Second World War, the National Science Foundation is formed. Before then, yet you form the national parks as a point of preservation. You have you keep moving forward. We have the Center for Disease Control, the National Institutes of Health. All of these are government agencies recognizing that our health and our wealth matter. And right on up through 1970, what happened then? Nixon is president. We remember him for Watergate and whatever, maybe China,
EPA,
but whatever else. Under him, the Environmental Protection Agency goes into play, as does NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, that's charged with monitoring Earth and oceans and land and atmosphere and their interrelationship as it relates to climate. And it's served by satellites, many of which are launched by NASA, in the service of monitoring this planet that we need for our sustenance. Put that aside for the moment. Now we ask the question, what percentage of American winners of the Nobel Prize were immigrants? Is it 10%? Is it 5%? No, it's a third. A third of all American Nobel Prizes are won by first-generation immigrants. And so let's get real here. You want to debate immigrants, you want to debate science, you want to debate, there's good data out there to tell us how we should conduct ourselves going forward. If you're either in denial of the data or you haven't read the data, that's one thing. If you know about it and you're in denial of it, again, I look back, something went wrong in the educational system.
So there's two images that I have in mind. One is where you said that I think in like 1 inch of your gut there were more bacteria than people who have ever lived on Earth. And in another part you're talking about, I think, a field of the sky that the Hubble telescope photographed, maybe the deep field, which I think there are more stars in that picture than there are grains of sand in the world. So what about us? We're like kind of suspended between very great and very small. What can we make of this?
Yeah, that's it's almost philosophical as you posed it, because with the invention of the telescope and the microscope, both came on the scene within 10 years of one another. It expanded our understanding of the sheer scale of things that matter in the universe. And we got to see things small, we got to see things large. And when you do that, you scratch your head and say, well, where do we fit in this sort of spectrum of sizes? Not only did telescopes do this for size, but other lines of investigation did that for time. We learned that time did not begin with the first humans. It long predates it back to the Big Bang. And the future of the universe is a whole other conversation. And so when you go through this exercise, each one of these discoveries has a way of decentralizing you from the conversation. Either you, the individual, we as humans, Earth as a place where we reside, and this demotion of our pride, this dismantling of your ego, is what the cosmic perspective is all about. And Dennis, you pulled out that reference to the gut bacteria from the last chapter of the dozen called Reflections on the Cosmic Perspective. And I offered that explanation because it's kind of weird to know that in 1 centimeter of your lower colon, there's more microbes that live and work than there are humans who have ever lived. Because if you want to say we're humans and we're the best and we're in charge, to those bacteria, you are simply a dark, anaerobic vessel of fecal matter. That is all you are. No matter what else you think of yourself, those bacteria are doing just fine, living out their lives. And if you upset them, they will let you know.
Right.
They're in charge. Yeah. Okay? So the cosmic perspective doesn't have to come from the universe. It can come from biological comparisons of what we are relative to other creatures on Earth.
We're insignificant either way.
Either way. But, in my opinion, what makes the cosmic perspective uplifting is to recognize that we build up our ego on the foundation, on the desire to be different. Think about it. I'm smarter than you and no one else is smart as I am. Or I'm faster than you and so I'm different and therefore I'm special. And what the cosmic perspective shows you is that you're not different, you're the same. The very elements in your body are found across the universe, manufactured in the cores of stars that exploded and scattered that enrichment across each galaxy in which those exploding stars occurred. The nitrogen, the oxygen, the carbon. These ingredients are not special. If we were made of like an isotope of bismuth, you'd have an argument to say, hey, we're made of special stuff. We must be important or particularly different. Mm-hmm. You're made of the most common ingredients of the universe. And those ingredients found across the universe tell us that not only are we in this universe, the universe is in us. And that idea is traceable to a lot of the writings of Carl Sagan and his collaborators over the years, just to think about it in this context. And I will add that while you want to feel special because you're different, I feel special because I'm the same. Because I know I'm made of the same ingredients as the stars. We are not figuratively, but literally stardust. I think everybody has looked up at some time in their life and wondered, where do we come from, where are we going, and what is our place in this universe? And this book, if I succeed, it will feed that bit of curiosity that I know you've had sometime in your life.
All right. I think you've left me and hopefully many other listeners feeling a little bit more comforted, more curious. And I want to thank my colleague, Dennis Overby, our Cosmic Affairs correspondent, for joining us.
As usual, you were spellbinding.
No, thanks, Dennis, for coming in. I know Dennis from a long time ago, and it's good to know we have scientifically literate journalists out there. So, Dennis,
even though we disagree on Pluto.
Okay. Well, we are
You'll
lucky.
Get over it.
We are lucky to have him at the Times.
And I'm honored that you're here at this. Thanks for coming, Dennis.
And very, very lucky to have you as our guest. The book, again, is Astrophysics for People in a Hurry by Neil deGrasse Tyson, already a #1 bestseller on Amazon. And so hopefully many, many more people will read it and keep it there.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so
for
much.
Your interest.
Alexandra Alter joins us now with some news from the publishing world. Hi, Alexandra.
Hi, Pamela.
What's going on out there?
So following up on our conversation from last week about the travails of Barnes & Noble, which has been struggling, I thought I'd bring in a little good news this week.
Good for you.
Yes.
Well done.
There's some strong signs that independent bookstores are doing well, and this is a trend that we've been seeing, for the last few years, following kind of the crunch that occurred when Barnes & Noble expanded. You had a lot of independents go out of business. So the American Booksellers Association, their most recent tallies from 2016 show that there are 1,775 independent stores around the country, and that's up from 1,410 just 6 years ago. So that's a significant expansion. And here in New York, there is a store that opened just this week called Books Are Magic. It opened in Brooklyn and Cobble Hill. And people in that neighborhood were really thrilled because everyone was devastated when Book Court closed. That was a store that had been a neighborhood institution for 35 years and sort of a literary gathering place. And the couple that opened Books Are Magic, it's Emma Straub, who's a novelist, and her husband, who's a graphic designer. And they were huge fans of Book Court, where Emma Straub was a bookseller for a while she was writing. So they really wanted to fill the void. And, she's one of a bunch of novelists who are sort of getting into bookselling recently. Judy Blume opened a store in Key West, which is Books and Books in Key West. Jeff Kinney opened a store in Plainville, Massachusetts. It's a wonderful store that's very whimsical and children's focused. And, of course, there's also Ann Patchett in Nashville, Larry McMurtry, Jonathan Lethem. So it's, you can imagine if you're a novelist.
The pressure that they're going to be under now to open bookstores. They all have to do it.
Yeah, no, it's funny. A lot of booksellers, I think, are writing on the side, and a lot of novelists love bookstores, and that's where they sort of discovered what interests them. And many of them owe their career to independent booksellers, so they kind of want to be part of that as well. So it's interesting that this is kind of a small but growing community of writers who sell their own books and others' books.
Happy news.
Yes.
Thank you, Alexandra, for
Thanks
that.
for having
we needed
me.
that this week. My colleagues, Greg Coles, John Williams, and Parl Sagal join us now to talk about what we're reading. Hi, guys.
Hey, Pamela.
Hi,
So
Pamela.
I'm gonna reveal something here, which is that all of you have shown up with no books. Oh wait, Greg has a book, and I am just as bad because I have the same book that I had last week, even though I said on the podcast that I would be done with it, and I tried so hard. I was so humiliated by the prospect of coming back here.
You lied to America.
I lied to America.
But also, we let it be known we don't have books, but we have opinions, and
All
we
right.
have things to say.
Since Greg has a book,
yeah,
maybe he
okay,
should start.
Okay,
Yeah,
we can-
I'll start. When people hear about what I do for a living, they say, wow, you read all those books. And I have to admit, no, I don't. I kind of look at all of these books that are coming out, and I only read ones cover to cover when I get sucked into them. So I don't often talk about books that are coming out in the future, but I have gotten sucked into one lately, and so I don't want to step too much on the review that will eventually run. But I'll mention the book is a novel called Modern Gods by Nick Laird. Nick Laird is actually Zadie Smith's husband and really made his mark first as a poet, but he's written several novels. This is at least his third, maybe his fourth novel, Modern Gods. And especially at the beginning, it just kind of hit my sweet spot. It's like a family comedy. It's got this satirical tone, maybe a little reminiscent of Jonathan Franzen, but it also opens with a nightclub shooting and has these interstitial chapters that go into the victims of the nightclub shooting. And then the second half gets a lot into anthropology and religion. And so it's a book that it's a very expansive, kind of sprawling book. So that's what I've been reading.
And John, what have you not been reading?
What I have not been reading is I got about 50 or 75 pages into The Heart is a Lonely Hunter by Carson McCullers, which I had never read. I had read
which I'm
her.
finding very funny for some reason.
I know you keep laughing every time I say it.
I want to laugh now.
I was here to mock everything that we read.
I read The Ballad of the Sad Cafe by her many years ago, which I really liked. And this is fine. I mean, it's a little bit, it does read like something you would read in school. Like, I don't want to say it's YA-ish, but it's a bit like sentimentalized. But I've been taking all these books home because, as you know, we're reorganizing the office. So I bought a couple of shelves that are arriving this week, and I'm in the middle of this huge reorganization of my books at home. And I think that's why I'm in a very rare spot where I don't feel like reading. I think I just feel overwhelmed by books.
I know, but
They're everywhere.
And this is what we were talking about yesterday. Like, there's a very melancholy feeling of sort of reordering your bookshelves, which I've been feeling because I was doing something of the same sort. And I was looking at all of these books and I was like, I have read all of you. and I know nothing.
Yeah, and I still
Nothing. Like you have not prepared me for anything, and so you do feel.
And I'm
this
still
little moment
glum.
No, it's
and
true.
bored.
And you're reading Carson McCullers, which again, it's a good book, but there's something so melancholy about this. I was a little
Yes.
worried for you. So I don't know. We're in a reading rut, but the odd thing is like what we do for work is read. So when I say I'm in a reading rut, I still read 4 books last week. But they were all for work and they were great and I recommend them. But that feeling of excitement, right? That feeling of like, oh, I need to go to sleep, but I'm one more chapter, or like I miss my train stop. That's not happening for me right now.
No, not
so
at
how
all.
do you guys reset when this happens? Like, do you have a book you go to?
Hopefully,
a
once
writer
the
you go to?
reorganization is done, that will just reset me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I have the opposite thing when I look at my bookshelves because I have not read all my books. I've read like none of my books. On the downside, I feel sort of overwhelmed by that sort of ignorance. But I find it exciting to reorganize my books because I lose track of what I have. And so when I reorganize them, I discover new books and I think like, oh, you.
Well, I should actually,
forgot
and I
about
want
you.
to differentiate myself
pleasure.
from Carl.
No, but there's also pleasure in reorganizing that sort
Yeah.
of scratches that same itch as reading. You know,
Right.
like you
You're like,
really
I've
do feel
reorganized
like-
them, so now I don't
Yeah.
have to read them.
That's the thing for me. I love reorganizing my books, and
No,
it's
it's the
very
best,
exciting.
but
But it is sort of like it's like a substitute for reading in a weird way, as seeing them as objects. But I would say I've probably read at best 40% of the books I
See,
own.
this is, I think, going to be very comforting to some of our listeners because I do get emails from listeners on a fairly regular basis saying, like, how do you people do it?
Yeah.
And the answer is we have no life. We have no
No,
lives.
I literally don't like anything else.
Yeah.
Right.
I like my
All I do
dog
is
and I
read.
like my books. And
You like
this
your
is-
baby.
I like my baby. My baby's been good this week.
So wait, are we making an oath that next week you'll have finished Ben Bradley?
I will have finished Ben Bradley. I promise. I only have like 20 pages left. And I do want to say it continues to be hugely fun, but also it's straddling this space between like the world is nothing like this anymore because this is a bygone era of journalism. This came out in the mid-90s before the internet intruded. And being totally relevant. So the chapter that I'm reading now is called National Security, and it's so contemporary because it's about, you know, the tension that journalists feel between writing about things that might jeopardize or imperil national security, or at least what the government considers to be jeopardizing national security, and also trying to expose things that they think need to be made public. And how do you negotiate that?
Yeah, that feels
that
more
tension?
relevant now than it was
It's more
then.
relevant, yes.
In most ways.
And then the chapter before that was about Janet Cook, who many people may recall was like the big plagiarist before our very own Jason Blair. So Jason Blair, if nothing else, took all of the focus off the Washington Post and Janet Cook and put it on us. But for those who don't recall this episode, Janet Cook was a reporter.
She won a Pulitzer even.
She won a Pulitzer for a story called Jimmy's World that she had entirely fabricated about an 8-year-old heroin addict.
Oh, my God.
And she wrote this, it, you know, starts off with this incredible scene with like 8-year-old Jimmy shooting up, and he's the 3rd generation heroin addict in the family, and just this wrenching, excruciating story.
why did she
Not
write
a
a
word of
novel?
it true. Right.
Yeah. So she got found out. There were some people who suspected her early on. And, you know, and Ben Bradley is very frank about this. She was considered a real get of a hire. She was African American. She was a woman at a time when newsrooms were overwhelmingly male. And she seemed to have excellent credentials. She, on her resume, spoke 4 languages. She had graduated from Vassar. She had not graduated from Vassar. She did not speak 4 languages. And there's this sort of, you know, terrible scene in which they confront her in a room. And Ben Bradley, who grew up speaking French, you know, spoke a little French at her, and she could not answer. And someone said, just say 2 words in Portuguese. And she didn't know 2 words. So she had made the entire thing up. And it was the winning the Pulitzer that exposed her because they began to pull together a biography of her and noticed that there were discrepancies in previous biographies of her. In one of them, you know, she had graduated from Vassar, and another she had attended but then switched. She had gone to the Sorbonne for this amount of time, and another she had gone to the Sorbonne for another amount of time. And so in trying to reconcile this, they went and sort of fact-checked even just the basics, like, did you go to Vassar? And, you know, found out that the whole thing was made up. And
God, to win a Pulitzer for it. That's really
Yes.
an amazing story.
Yeah, but journalism has survived. I mean, the Washington Post has survived, but it is a fascinating book. And again, it's like journalism, it's that first draft of history, and yet it's also very contemporary.
Well, if you promise to finish it, Parla and I will promise to start reading again.
Or at least be in a better mood.
All right. And Greg will be back next week with The Power Broker.
No.
Just kidding. All right. Thanks so much,
Thanks,
guys.
Pamela.
Thanks, Pamela.
Remember, there's more at nytimes.com/books, and you can always write to us at books@nytimes.com. Inside the New York Times Book Review is produced by Pedro Rosado. Thanks for listening. For the New York Times, I'm Pamela Paul.